For some reason, I don't know whether it's the staff of the DOJ or who it is, but they simply, they know what they need to do, but they simply refuse to.
If it stands as it is now, right now, would you vote?
Well, I'm not prepared to vote yes.
You've been incredibly clear for days now. What do you think the holdup is here?
Beats me. Maybe they think I'm just going to give up or, go along, but they're mistaken. I think they realize now that we're serious, and I think Senator Tillis is pretty much on the same page that I am. So they better get real, and there's not much time left.
Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas yesterday, prior to the postponement of a vote to advance the nomination of Todd Blanche as U.S. Attorney General.
They know what the problem is. I mean, the problem, Lemire, is that Blanche will not put in writing that they're not going to have that corrupt IRS still, where everybody gets a get-out-of-jail-free card if they break the laws of this land.
Yeah, Blanche had verbally committed to do that, but for these senators, they say that's not enough, and it's two things. It's these IRS protections for Trump, his family, his businesses going forward, just extraordinary, unprecedented shielding was being considered there, as well as
corruption.
That's the corruption and the slush fund, the weaponization fund that could be even used for January 6th convicted felons, and Blanche simply won't rule that out. And the other lesson, guys, here is this is also one of the reasons why presidents don't usually oppose sitting senators of their own party in their primaries, because when you pick them off, they feel like they don't owe you anything anymore.
Yeah.
Also on Capitol Hill yesterday, Dr. Anthony Fauci refused...
Oh, I was waiting for this hearing. And Lemire, I'll tell you why I was waiting for this hearing. Because I was so excited that the Republicans were finally going to admit that the president that they had been a member of a personality cult with for a decade now had actually told Bob Woodward that he lied to the American people about the COVID virus. He knew it was bad. And Rand Paul, of course, heard Donald Trump's tape with Bob Woodward saying, yeah, I lied to the American people. I didn't tell them how bad it was going to be because I didn't want to hurt the Dow Jones. And Jonathan, time and time again, he kept saying, oh, it's just one person from China. It's going to go away in January and February. He said, this is nothing. It'll be gone by April. On and on and on. I'm so I didn't see the hearings yesterday, but I understand.
I did.
They must have said that, right, Jonathan?
Joe, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's not quite how yesterday played out. The Republicans, in particular, stand right. I know. Check your notes.
Shocking.
I know. This is just poor show prep, I guess. We needed to. But yeah, this is. Take a look. That's not what happened. There was none of that. There was no admission that President Trump knew how bad this was going to be and didn't tell the American people.
They talked about the disinfectants under the skin and the lights under the skin, right? They did bring that up, right? That
I'm getting in my ear.
The part where he didn't tell the American.
That didn't happen either. No,
Okay.
it's
all right,
no,
we'll
none of that. None of that happened. Yeah.
This is going to be interesting. I bet Mika has something to say about this.
A full report ahead for you since you didn't do your show prep. I did it for you. Also ahead, MS Now legal reporter Lisa Rubin joins us to discuss new reporting on Secret Service agents surveilling former FBI Director James Comey to dramatic extents, really. And we'll bring you the latest from the Middle East, where the Iran war is expanding, with Saudi Arabia now involved. It comes as there is new reporting that President Trump is frustrated with the conflict and members of his own administration.
We're talking about a lot this morning. I mean, the Fauci thing, just sheer political theater. They shamed themselves. We Americans needed answers yesterday. We needed answers on the origins of this, the best information they had, the thinking about closing down schools, the thinking about all these other things. I mean, and if it had been a normal hearing where you didn't have the chairman of the committee going in saying, I'm going to put Anthony Fauci behind bars, then as the Wall Street Journal said, we could have had that open conversation. But you start with your chairman saying, I'm going to put him behind bars. Yeah, what you're doing is you're staging nothing but a show trial, and so
great performance.
He didn't play along. It's some embarrassing performances. Guys swearing that and then you had other people. What's the color? What's the color of your tie? What's the color of the carpet?
Okay.
It was such a...
Maybe you did do show prep.
Okay, I just get... Alex just told me this there. It was such a clown show, but there are still open questions on the origins of this virus.
All right, we'll have more
And by
on
the
that.
way, I just want to say really quickly, if they had asked Dr. Fauci or any other scientist, why did you close down schools? Because in retrospect, that looked like such a horrible mistake. Fauci probably would have said yesterday, and other scientists would have said, well, in our last pandemic, the 1919 pandemic, that was so deadly, it actually spread and attacked younger Americans. So those schools, and I remember this being said by everybody at the time of the virus, the schools were the super spreaders during the 1919 pandemic, and that is the only pandemic that we had to work off of. But we didn't get a chance to hear that yesterday because the entire hearing was framed with, I'm going to put the guy who's testifying here behind bars.
Much more on this ahead. Also with us this morning, we have contributing writer at The Atlantic, Eugene Robinson, senior writer at The Dispatch.
Eugene once told me, I'm going to put Joe behind bars.
I know. Senior columnist at Bloomberg Opinion, David Drucker, is with us. Co-host of the Rest is Politics podcast, Caddy Kay, from London this morning, where apparently, Caddy, there is a 57-minute delay to actually get to you.
You know, the British may have saved Western civilization in 1940 and 1941, but they obviously don't know how to play in a World Cup when it matters, and I guess they haven't figured out the latency thing, Caddy. You got like a 57-second delay.
Wow, so harsh.
Wow.
So harsh. You had to bring up the World Cup as well. That was vicious.
Yeah, we did. We did. By the way, Caddy will hear what we're saying back to her next Tuesday. This is like Bruce Willis.
Okay.
In that space movie with comets talking to Liv Tyler.
Exactly. So we'll get to Caddy
it's going to
on
take
Tuesday.
a while.
Okay,
Armageddon,
let's get to our top story this morning. With less than 100 days
movie.
until the midterms, new polling shows a record number of Americans don't think President Trump has the right priorities. According to a new CNN SSRS poll, 73% of adults say the president hasn't paid enough attention to the country's most important problems. The poll shows Trump's overall approval rating sits at 34%, which matches the career low he saw at the end of his first term after the January 6th Capitol attack. His approval has hit a new low among independent voters, and he's also underwater among white voters with or without a college degree, young voters, along with both men and women. You can compare these numbers to the same point in his first time in 2018 when Trump's approval rating among independents was much higher. He had a majority of support among white voters without a college degree and men, and higher support from members of his own party.
Yeah, Jonathan Lemire, I was looking it up while Mika was reading these numbers, but I don't really have to look it up. I was going to see if the Democrats' own approval ratings were at 50, 60, 70, 80%. Of course, no, they're not. Usually what we found is when you have these record low numbers by Donald Trump, the only people who are polling lower than him usually are, Boston, it was Craig Breslow. But yeah, Democrats have historically low approval ratings. Why do I bring that up? Not to be a buzzkill at 6:09 in the morning, but just to say that, yes, Donald Trump's approval ratings are low. What that would mean in every other off-year election is Republicans were going to get routed. That is the best predictor. Where a president stands on the economy is the best predictor. Chances are good it'll be the best predictor now. But that said, the massive financial advantage Republicans have especially with the DNC being bankrupt right now. And also some of the radicalism that we've seen over the past week or two by the DSA, driving their approval ratings even lower. So I think this election's still up for grabs, even with the president's low approval ratings. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think Democrats, look, never underestimate their ability to blow it. We have learned that over cycle after cycle. And the financial issues are very real. When we had a story earlier this week about how the DNC had, was a victim of some fraud and some money was stolen. The joke that I heard from many people was like, oh, there was money left to steal because their fundraising has been so poor to this point. But you're right. I mean, this is, David Drucker, let's bring you in on this. President Trump is deeply unpopular, historically so. And that is true for many in his party as well. Republicans, there are significant headwinds here. First, there's just the history. It's a midterm election, usually not good for the party in power. He's also high prices, the war, the list goes on and on why Republicans are nervous. Democrats, as Joe just said, they're not faring much better in these polls, and they're certainly going to have to improve the sense of the brand. What does the Democratic Party actually stand for? But at least those in the party that I've talked to think that's more of a 2028 problem than a 2026 problem. I mean, they're nervous because they're Democrats, and they should be, but they think this might be enough. Trump's historic unpopularity might be enough here, combined with some candidate quality, and they feel like they've got some good ones to get them over to the finish line this fall anyway.
Yeah, I think that those Democrats are actually pretty on track here. And look, we didn't, speaking of show prep, we didn't need any to sort of understand where Trump is and the box he's put his party in. I'd focus on that number about not focus on the right priorities. That's a big deal. Also, the number with independents. In midterm elections, those two things are killers. What do the Republicans have going for them? And this is, I think, what Democrats have to worry about, because Democratic voters are unhappy with the Democratic Party. They're going to show up at the polls in droves to both vote against Donald Trump, but also to put people in office they think are going to fix the party and do the things that the party hasn't been doing. And so that, to me, is crucial when you look at how this midterm election is going to play out. What Democrats have to worry about is that mid-decade gerrymandering has reduced the number of competitive seats. And on the Senate side, as we've all discussed many times before, the road to any majority runs through some pretty red seats, and that's going to be very difficult for Democrats any way you slice it, even though it's doable.
Yeah, and Gene Robinson, another thing that's playing out here is the fact that if you go issue by issue by issue, something that also matters, President Trump, underwater on everything. And most telling, look at that top line.
Oh, my gosh.
And this is something... This is something I've had conversations with the White House, and I've asked them, and I asked 6 months ago. So are you all going to keep doing the same immigration policy? You're going to keep doing these horrid attempts to continue what you're calling mass deportation? Because you're getting crushed in the polls. And there seemed to be this understanding after Minneapolis that they were going to change. And they just haven't. And because of it, look, it's not only a humanity crisis, but it's a political crisis for this White House that will not stop putting their hand on the hot stove. And now Donald Trump's strongest issue was immigration, is now an issue where he is 17 points upside down. I've got to be honest with you. I've seen Democrats screw up a lot of things. I've seen them play politics like the Harlem Globetrotters nemesis, the Washington Generals play basketball. But I'm not even sure if they can screw this one up.
Yeah, well, the Washington Generals, didn't they win one game once? I think this one is hard to screw up. Look, when has Donald Trump ever been underwater at all, except recently on immigration? To say nothing of being underwater as far as he is, it just doesn't happen. That has been his best issue. And he's, people don't like what he's doing. They just don't like what ICE is doing. They don't like this policy that Stephen Miller is cramming down the throats of Americans. They don't like it. And, ask Mike DeWine in Ohio, a Republican, about the end of temporary protective status for Haitians, whom he wants in the state, who the local people in Springfield, Ohio, want to stay in the state because they need them. They're great workers. They're good citizens, but they're going to get kicked out, and that's not going to make friends in Ohio for this president and this party. I agree with David. I think Democrats, since they have this history, they can blow it. They need to first concentrate on the House because they really have an edge there, despite the redistricting antics of Republicans. They really ought to take the House. They ought to make sure they take the House.
Yeah.
And then the Senate seats, they have a chance. But I would make sure I locked up the House before I spent a lot of money, not that they have any money, on the Senate.
So we're going to get to the latest in Iran, where there's a lot to talk about, but there's also a poll to talk about related. The latest Quinnipiac University poll, 34% of voters support U.S. military action against Iran, compared to 60% who oppose it. That is the lowest support for the war and the highest opposition to it since Quinnipiac first began tracking this issue in early March. Again, Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran. Nobody expected or even thought he promised something like this.
And Gene, back to you. There's always been, and there have been books written about this, the hardened 33% on the right, whether it was, in the 60s, the John Birch Society and white nationalists and the most extreme of the extreme. There's always been the 33%, the hard 33% that stays with you. Not saying that's who the hard 33% is on the far right now. I'm not saying that's who the MAGA right is right now. I'm just simply saying I've always told people there's 33% on one side no matter what. There's 33% on the other side no matter what. You're playing for the middle. I think it's fascinating in all of these polls. Donald Trump sitting at 33, 34%. Even for a war in Iran that's deeply unpopular, he's sitting at 33, 34%. And that means he's got his hardened base, and that may be why his numbers with independents are just so dreadful right now.
Yeah, and that's really the problem, Joe. I mean, in both parties, there's ideology, right, that drives a lot of people, and so they want to, on the Democratic side, they want to go further left, and on the Republican side, there is that hardcore way on the right. But it is simply true that you've got to win independents. Who tend to lean Democratic or lean Republican, but they are persuadable. And the ones who lean Republican usually, it seems to me, are much less likely to come out to support Republican candidates this fall because they just don't like this administration and what it's doing. They don't like this Congress and what it's not doing. It's do-nothing Congress. And and so that's a difficult dynamic. Again, Democrats going to Democrat, and so they could blow this, but it would be really hard because of those independents. They will decide this election.
Well, and there's also another angle of it, David Drucker. I know you can speak to this. The other angle of it is that when Donald Trump's on the ballot, Republicans do better. When Donald Trump's on the ballot, even if his approval ratings are lower, people come out to vote that don't usually come out to vote. When he's not on the ballot, this Republican Party turns into the old Republican Party pre-Donald Trump, and they have their traditional Republicans come out, and those people that would come out to vote for Donald Trump just stay at home, and there's nothing they can do to change that.
Yeah, there are just so many voters in the United States that will vote once every 25 years or so when they think there's a politician out there who's not really of either party, right? Not a politician. Trump, after 10 years, has still managed to maintain that sort of perception with a lot of voters, which is why they were able to get so many of those, what we call low propensity voters. People don't show up that often in 2024. and earlier. And it's why Republicans have had a hard time in midterm elections with Trump as president. Of course, we'll see how this one goes. But, I just want to mention one thing, Joe, on the war, notwithstanding the president's low approval rating and the fact that he's not focused on the right issues. It's hard to ask Americans to support a war when you're not making a concerted, specific, consistent case for it, right? He's not asking anybody to support the war. He's not giving them reasons to support the war. And so all they see is this back and forth. We're fighting, we're not fighting. And I think that has a lot to do. I think that explains a lot about why this war has been particularly unpopular from day one.
Yeah, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to talk about the war. He wants the war to go away. Understandably, any politician in his position would want the war to go away. The Iranians will not let the war go away. I will say, though, after the big, I just can't call it a beautiful bill when it kicks people in red state America and blue state America off of healthcare rolls and shuts down hospitals. That big, horrid bill. The president didn't go out. Remember, we told reports time and time again about how the president didn't go out and campaign for that. He's not engaged in that right now. He's not on the ballot.
Strange.
So he's not engaged, and he doesn't want to talk about this war because he's hoping he can bring it to an end, but the Iranians just won't let it come to an end.
So there's more with it. We're going to talk more with Katty Kay, and General Herdling is going to join us. Egypt now involved, Saudi Arabia. It's metastasizing. We'll have the very latest straight ahead on Morning Joe. 25 past the hour, the United States has launched major strikes against Iran after the country fired ballistic missiles at U.S. forces in Jordan. President Trump had promised retaliation after the attack by Tehran, saying, quote, "We're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn." The strikes come as the war enters its 6th month, and amid reports of growing frustration inside the White House. NBC News reports Trump has become increasingly exasperated by the length of the conflict and Iran's refusal to reach a deal. According to the report, Trump recently erupted at top national security officials over his frustrations, with one official saying there is no unity within the Trump administration on Iran. The White House denies the president lost his temper, but says he remains committed to punishing Iran until its attacks stop. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has joined U.S. operations with strikes on Iran-backed groups in Iraq. Saudi Arabia accused Iranian-backed militias of attacking Saudi oil facilities, but so far, no group has claimed responsibility. And in Egypt, 2 ships caught fire in an explosion at a port. In an incident, one maritime security firm says may have been a drone attack, though that has not been confirmed.
So, Katty Kay, Henry Kissinger's insight that when you're in the White House and making decisions on war and peace, the choice is never between a good decision and a bad decision. It's between 2 bad decisions, and you have to pick the poison. Boy, that has never applied more, I think, than to where President Trump is right now. We're in a war. We can't cut and run as much as Republicans want them to cut and run, because then that defines that region for maybe a generation, and Iran becomes the dominant player. But there doesn't seem to be a military solution as well. And now it's really expanding out into regional warfare. Talk about our allies, how concerned they are that now Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the region have been pulled into this war.
Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Yemen. This was the fear when I was speaking to people who are experts on proliferation in that region about a month or so ago. They said the problem is that this has left it far more vulnerable because you have these tensions now. You've got tensions not just between the Iranians and the Gulf states. You've also got tensions within the Gulf states between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's surfaced all of these long-running economic and security tensions. The Saudis don't want the Israelis to be helping the Gulf states with any kind of defensive measures, which they were doing early on in the war. So I think we really do have a situation now where if this does not get resolved diplomatically with serious negotiators, with experts who understand what proliferation is in the region, then we are in a position where this could expand beyond what was initially seen as just a strike by the Americans and the Israelis against Iran. And you've got the prospect longer term of nuclear proliferation in the region as well. You're right. Kissinger was right. If it gets to the president's desk, it's probably because there's no easy solution anyway. But the easiest solution would have been just not to go in. And now that they are in, they've got to find a way diplomatically to get out of this.
No doubt that was the original sin going in, but we are there
Warned
now.
against it.
And, you know, the fact that Egypt has now been brought into it, the fact that the Saudis have reluctantly decided they're going to have to engage aggressively, it expands into a regional war. Let's bring in right now decorated combat veteran and former commander of the U.S. Army Europe, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He's an MS Now military analyst. General, of course, the decision was made to go into Iran. And people on this show, I'm sure you, everybody else said the president shouldn't do it. The president did it. So we are here now. Mm-hmm. If the president calls you into the Oval Office today and says, General, what the hell do I do? I've got Vance and others telling me I need to cut and run. I've got Marco, I don't know if Marco's telling him this or not, and others on his side telling me I need to double down, that we can't be weak, we can't leave an empowered Iran. What direction should I go in? What do you tell President Trump this morning?
Well, the first thing I would say, Joe, is to be careful of your language. I'm going to go to what Mika said a minute ago. His comment in the Oval Office yesterday, which struck me, was we're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn to hit them. We are stuck in a back and forth. It's tactical, proportional responses. And let's talk about the target list of what they hit. Let's all take our hymnal out and say military command centers, missiles and drone facilities, and surveillance sites along the coast. That's what they've been hitting now for 5 months. So my advice to the president is you can't keep doing the same things you're doing, and you got to be very careful with our allies like Saudi Arabia, striking targets outside the area of operation. You know, one of the things I would share with them, first of all, is because of my experiences in Iraq. When you have Saudi Arabia striking Popular Mobilization Front proxies inside of Iraq, you're further disrupting that government. And when you say that word PMF, or those three letters PMF, the Popular Mobilization Front, there's about 60 of those groups inside of Iraq, from the Badr Corps, Al-Haq, Kataib, Hezbollah. You know, it is a Star Wars bar scene of fighters. And when you start fighting them, then the Iraqi government, which would like to stay out of this, has to get involved inside their own territory. So you now have Egypt, as Caddy just said, Jordan, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Iraq, all of them are joining into this fight. So you got to find a way to narrow it down. And the only thing I can tell the president is you've got to get away from the bombing. You're not going to kill your way out of this. You've got to get some good negotiators in there and basically show a little humility to Iran, even if you lose some things in the process.
So General, so military, obviously, giving them $500 billion, making them the strongest country in the region is not the answer. The MOU, I think, was a disaster. But also, you're saying you can't, there's no military victory here ultimately, certainly not from the air. So is the middle ground possibly squeezing them economically and continuing to squeeze them economically until they come to the table?
Yeah, I think it's the use of all elements of national power, Joe. It's not just the military. You can use that as a stick, but you have to also use, to a degree, the economic power of the United States against them. But you also have to help the world get involved in this, too, with sanctions. It isn't going to just be the United States. We had an indicator that the UK last weekend was going to start a council of discussion with us. That seems to have dissipated. I'm not sure where that is or where it went. but it's going to take not only the economic and the diplomatic, but the informational piece as well. The president can't stop talking about this on Twitter and what he's going to do, or Truth Social, and what he's going to do next. That's part of informational power. You can't keep threatening a regime that doesn't seem to want to believe your threats. And by the way, you have to understand, too, the way Iran is coming at this. They have multiple sources of their nexus of power. You're not just dealing with their negotiators. You're dealing with a rabid IRGC. You're dealing with a population that now thinks we are the great Satan because we've been bombing them for 4 months, and we have no economic leverage at all whatsoever and no alliances to help us. So from the beginning, this has been disruptive, but now it's even getting worse because the president continues to do the same thing he's been doing for 5 months and expecting different outcomes. And we're showing right now on the screen the things that the Defense Department wants us to see, which I continue to call war porn. I don't care if a truck is blowing up like it just did just now. What is the effect? What is the political outcome of all those explosions? And right now, there is none, and there hasn't been for a very long time.
Wow. There are reports Iran is expected to receive Chinese-made missile launchers in the coming weeks as part of an effort to strengthen its short-range air defenses. President Trump was asked yesterday about that development. Take a look.
President Xi told you that China would not give or sell Iran any weapons. And there's a new report that Iran's about to get 400 rocket launchers from China going through Pakistan to Iran.
Well, that would be surprising. I mean, things like that happen, but that would be surprising. He told me very strongly he wouldn't partake, and he knows I'd be quite disappointed. Yeah, please. And he's coming here, I think, on September 24th.
You know, Jonathan Lemire, we've seen it time and again. The president defends Vladimir Putin. He defends the communist Chinese leader. He understands that they are actively helping Iran, and yet he brushes it off. And, of course, who is helping us against Iran? The Ukrainians. They're giving us technology. I mean, we tried brushing it away, but now we're starting to work with them. So it remains an enduring mystery, I suppose, for enterprising journalists at some point, or historians, to figure out exactly why this president ignores, as he did in Helsinki in 28, the information coming from his own intel community, brushes it off, and says that he believes the world's most tyrannical dictators instead of his own intel chiefs in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's been a through line for a decade or more. Trump always gives the strongmen the benefit of the doubt. Helsinki most famously, but he does it frequently. And there again, it's often Putin.
Did it there?
Yes, his rhetoric,
right there.
His rhetoric is a little warmer to Zelensky these days, but he's still not denouncing Putin. And he cozies up to Xi Jinping. And I think he gave up the game right there where he noted that summit's coming. He doesn't want to disrupt that. He's still working on that relationship. These ideas of a trade deal or big economic advancements, whatever it might be, he puts that first over U.S. intel reports. I mean, let's remember, it was just 2 weeks ago where he gave a primetime address from the Oval Office, from the White House, denouncing China's alleged election interference. And yet there are no consequences. He's not going to, I mean, that's, of course, most of it was unfounded, but still, he's not even following through. He doesn't dare, Gene Robinson, he doesn't dare upset Beijing. He doesn't want to do it. Well, and again, it is extraordinary here where China, and we know Russia's helping as well, seems to be actively assisting the country with which we are at war, and the President of the United States just, shrugs it off.
No, he shrugs it off, and he has always treated China and especially Russia with a deference that I think comes from his worldview. He sees them as big countries and like the United States, and he doesn't particularly want to mess with them. I think he'd be happier if he and Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping could sit down like at Yalta or something and split up the world into spheres of influence. I think that's kind of his mindset. I want to get back to something, though, that Joe mentioned. You mentioned Ukraine in the context of Iran, and that's because the other day Ukraine actually struck an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea that was apparently bringing weapons from Iran to Russia. Or at least that's the allegation. Caddy, I'm wondering, what, if anything, are you hearing in London about that? And how wide can this war get?
I mean, that was clearly the focus of Volodymyr Zelensky when he was in Washington, right? In the last couple of days, was to try to conflate the two and remind American leaders that there is a link, and that if they don't deal with Russia, they're going to have more problems from Iran. That's certainly something that would make sense to Europeans, because they have been worried for a long time about Russia on their doorstep trying to widen the war onto multiple fronts. I mean, I think there is a serious risk here of a greater conflagration of these conflicts if the Russians carry on trying to supply the Iranians with weapons. I mean, now maybe the focus in Washington probably needs to be General Hertling on trying to the sanctions that bill that was just went through this part of the Senate, and the tariffs against the Indians and the Chinese, to make sure that pipeline also stops for funding the war from the Russian point of view. But do you see now some kind of conflagration between these two conflicts, and what would be the way to stop the Russians meddling in Iran?
No, Caddy, I don't see it now. I've seen it for months. What we're talking about, I mean, even last night, if you're looking at the Ukrainian front, Kyiv was struck once again by multiple drones and missile systems from Russia. They are getting them from somewhere, because basically their military machine is running out of steam. So you have the combination of Russia providing targeting to Iran, targeting data. We have heard that from open source, and I'm sure it's true. We've seen the potential for Chinese ships to be delivering launchers. And my question would be, what happens if the intelligence community comes in with a targeting list and says, hey, we've got a Chinese ship, name the name, going into one of Iranians' transfer points to give them weapons? What do we do at that point? Do we just believe the president who says, oh, I'm going to talk to President Xi, or I'm going to talk to President Putin? This is going to be a conflagration unless we get our arms around it and understand that other people are playing in this realm and want to see the United States put in a cauldron of activity in the Middle East. And until we recognize that there are other players in this that are doing that, it's going to continue on the way it's been. And the president is not speaking directly to the American people the truth about all of the players. You know, he's given it the hand wave. Hey, I'm going to talk to Xi, I'm going to talk to Putin, and I believe what they say. Well, that's dangerous, because they are not acting on our behalf in this war that we started inside of Iran.
All right, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, always honored to have you here. Thank you for being here, and as always, thank you so much for your service to America. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
David, could you help us sort through where the Republicans are right now? You know, because there is obviously a split, and there has been since '94 when I came in. You know, the former Republican in me is repelled by the thought of an MOU that leaves Iran as the most dominant force in the Middle East. I see that as a generational failure and disaster. And I know there are a lot of Republicans, current Republicans, who feel the same way. There's the other side of me that was, I won't say an isolationist, but was opposed to the United States going to war in almost every instance. Of course, post 9/11, that changed. And like most Americans, I made a terrible mistake on Iraq, thinking, you know, the administration had a point there. But other than that, Republicans, for the most part, don't want to get into wars, I've found. But once they're there, they don't want to leave enemies strengthened. So with all of that, sort of those balancing, those competing sort of tugs, where is this Republican Party now? Who are the people in the White House that the president's frustrated with, pulling him one way and the others pulling him the other way? And how are they feeling on Capitol Hill about this war?
Yeah, so I think you very aptly described where the party remains. There's just, I'd say, an added faction, right? I mean, you have the hawks and you have the people who want to project strength but are restrained. And these days you also have the Trump says, right? And this is the group that Trump says go to war and we're going to go to war. Trump says no forever wars and we're for no, so-called forever wars. And I think the best way to understand Trump, and this is why it's always very difficult to gauge him, and it's hard for Republicans on the Hill to sort of rally around anything, is Trump is angry and frustrated at whatever isn't working and whoever told him to do that. Right? So let's just presume that Secretary Rubio believes we should go into Iran, that now is the time. And that is all well and good until it isn't working. Let's say that Vice President Vance tells him now's the time to cool our jets and try and establish a diplomatic deal. That's all well and good until it isn't working. And Republicans on the Hill, and I've experienced this over the past 10 years in talking to them, they're just constantly trying to figure out where the president is to begin with, because they don't want to be on the wrong side of him publicly. They don't mind being on the wrong side of him privately, and many of them will use private relationships that they have with him to steer him one way or the other. But they don't want to be seen as publicly opposed, because the president gets angry at that, and then their own voters get angry at that. And again, I will just get back to this, Joe, because I think it is so important as we understand where the Congress is and where public opinion is. The president never asked for buy-in. He never went to Republicans on the Hill, made a concerted effort. I mean, forget Democrats on the Hill, but they're included in this. They're of the Congress, and said, Iran is a growing danger. We have tried diplomacy for 47 years. Here is what is going to happen if things don't change. Here is what is happening because things haven't changed with buy-in. He never did that. They're not a part of the decision making. And so in a sense, they're like a pinball that's just being sent this way and that way. And honestly, what they want to do at this point is survive the midterm elections. They would love for the focus to get back to what they are trying to do to address economic concerns, because Republicans on the Hill, contra Trump, are trying to do that. And that is sort of this netherworld that they're existing in right now.
Oof. All right, still ahead on Morning Joe, we're going to get to Republican Senator Rand Paul's new threat to hold Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress after his appearance before lawmakers yesterday. Plus, new reporting on Secret Service agents being pressured by the Trump administration to secretly surveil former FBI Director James Comey. And as we go to break, a look at the traveler's forecast this morning from AccuWeather's Bernie Rayno. Bernie, how's it looking? Capitol Hill for you there. Republican Senator Rand Paul says he will call for a vote next week to hold Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress.
What a surprise. So this is the same Rand Paul that's been saying for years he's going to put Anthony Fauci behind bars.
Yeah.
Boy, that was a really good way, as the Wall Street Journal said, to set up that hearing. To say, hey, come on in, testify to us, please be open, let us know how you made your decisions, let us know what you think about the lab leak theory. But by the way, I'm going to put you behind bars. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like Letitia James campaigning for office as Attorney General, promising to put Donald Trump behind bars. Kind of undercuts the credibility.
All this after Dr. Fauci refused to answer any questions from lawmakers during a hearing on COVID-19 that lasted over 3 hours yesterday. MS Now's Britt Miller has the details.
A high-stakes hearing on Capitol Hill gets heated.
Who the do you think you were for doing that? It is a total disgrace what you did to this country.
As lawmakers on the Homeland Security Committee drill Dr. Anthony Fauci about his role in the COVID pandemic, contending he lied about its origins.
Did his actions lead to the largest man-made plague in human history? Are the millions dead the result of his experiments?
Dr. Fauci, who led the nation's COVID response, wouldn't answer a single question, invoking the Fifth Amendment.
In hindsight, are you disappointed how you handled COVID? Do you have any regrets?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Asserting his rights more than 100 times.
Let's try something. What day of the week is it today?
I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color tie are you wearing?
I respectfully decline to answer based
His reason? The former infectious diseases director says Senator Rand Paul, who subpoenaed Fauci, is, quote, obsessed with calling for his prosecution. And even though Fauci was preemptively pardoned by President Biden, it only covers past conduct.
The only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars.
His appearance comes just days after Senator Paul released more than 1,000 pages from Fauci's personal diary. The Republican senator renewing claims the doctor privately wrote about the virus possibly being leaked from a lab, but later dismissed the theory publicly. Paul has long supported the lab leak theory, blaming Fauci because the NIH funded research at an institute in Wuhan, China.
Your primary concern was avoiding culpability. Your primary concern was hiding the fact that you had approved the funding for this dangerous research.
Fauci has denied any wrongdoing, but this political fight isn't over. He could now face contempt of Congress charges. And according to a 2025 report from the World Health Organization, available evidence suggests the virus was transmitted from animals to humans, a theory Fauci has supported. Back to you.
Britt Miller, thank you for that report. So let's do a little recent history lesson. Yesterday's wretched performance by Senate Republicans was the latest in a long, pathetic attempt by members of a political cult that has spent 6 years trying to desperately avert Americans' eyes from the real perpetrators of COVID lies, President Donald Trump and his spineless minions in Congress, some of who you saw there. The horrors of Fauci talking to Barbara Streisand, Julia Roberts, keeping count of his glowing press accounts, and because no one does that, not the president, and using data from the last U.S. global pandemic to guide early decisions was child's play compared to the deadly lies coming out of the White House. President Trump admitted to Bob Woodward on tape that he refused to prepare Americans for the horrors of COVID because he didn't want to hurt the economy. He withheld that information from the American people. Take a look at what he told Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Bob Woodward.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. You know, people don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
it's pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per, this is 5% versus 1%. Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Okay, so he wanted to play it down and not tell the American people about COVID. The President of the United States withholding that information from the American people. But yesterday, not a word from Senate Republicans about that mendacious decision from the president about a virus that would kill millions of people. In January of 2020, Trump said the coronavirus threat was only one person coming in from China. That's a quote. We have it totally under control. That's a quote. It's going to be just fine. That's a quote. This lie came after the president's intelligence community had already been warning him for 2 weeks about the coming threat when he told Americans that reckless claim. No word yesterday from preening lawmakers who were cursing at times on that deadly negligence from the President of the United States. In February, Trump predicted the virus would go away by April. It's like a miracle. It will disappear. That deliberate lie also came weeks after White House staff members warned the virus could imperil millions of American lives while costing the U.S. economy trillions of dollars. In March, the president told worried Republican senators to just stay calm because it will go away. That's a quote. Trump spent much of that month ignoring warnings from the best scientists across the world by declaring that the untested use of a malaria drug to treat COVID-19 could be the biggest game changer in the history of medicine. His own White House had to warn soon after that using this untested drug to treat the virus was dangerous because it caused serious heart problems. Trump's lies continued full force in April, with the flustered president assuring reporters that COVID-19 might not come back at all this fall. It was Dr. Fauci who once again had to correct the president's spurious claims and tell Americans the truth about this deadly crisis. The next day, Trump publicly peppered his staff and medical team about the positive benefits of ingesting bleach and how the implanting of lights might cure pandemic patients.
So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute. 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number in the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
I'd like to point out they had to set up morgues outside New York City hospitals for the thousands of dead people. And this president is talking about injecting bleach. Once again, it was Dr. Fauci and Trump's own administration that had to warn the public against placing any credence in the president's maniacal ramblings on this. Maniacal. Screaming Republicans somehow neglected yesterday to once again place blame where it belonged, at the feet of their cult leader. They're too scared. They were too busy performing for him. While these crazed remedies and delusional denials were trotted out by Trump at his bizarre daily press conferences, 1.2 million Americans died of a COVID virus.